Specter Red here with a report on Chavez and the country of Venezuela. Also included in this broadcast is a news report on terrorism in Iraq. Hugo Chavez became president of Venezuela in February 1999. Later that year, Chavez desired a new legislative body, one that could serve the people, and put forth a referendum to create a new constitutional assembly. This referendum was passed with a resounding yes vote of 72%. The political party Polo Patriotico was elected to 95% of the seats of the new Constitutional Assembly. With this new president and legislative branch of the government elected by the people of Venezuela came a new constitution. This new constitution, created by the Constitutional Assembly, was approved in December 1999 and granted the people of Venezuela wider civil liberties. With only a year and a half in office, Chavez was re-elected as president in July 2000 with a 60% of the popular vote. The election was monitored by the American nonprofit organization, the Carter Center, who reported that the election expressed the will of the people. To put this election in perspective, a president hasn't been elected in the U.S. with 60% of the popular vote since before I was born. It's also interesting to point out, though, that President George W. Bush was elected as president in 2000 with a minority of the popular vote. Gore actually had the majority. However, towards the end of 2000, the National Assembly granted Chavez power to decree, but only for 1 year. It wasn't until November 2001 that Chavez exercised this ability by enacting 49 decrees. Many of the reforms put forward by Chavez were aimed at improving the quality of life in Venezuela, such as free government-funded healthcare system and free education for primary and secondary levels. At the end of 2001, Venezuela had 1 million more students in its educational system, and inflation had fallen to its lowest since 1986. Kind of sounds like Chavez was doing a good job, huh? Well, when Chavez made his decrees, he pissed off a group with the initials CTV, which functions similar to a labor union. What's odd about this group is that it supports right-wing politics, unlike the unions here in the U.S. that often support left-wing politics. The decree that upset CTV was enacted so that the workers in the union would have greater control over the leadership of the union. In other words, Chavez directed that democracy should exist within the union. CTV responded by calling for a general strike and, by all accounts, inciting a riot. With people dying in the ensuing violence, the Venezuelan government took control of the media in an effort to dissuade further bloodshed. Government messages were transmitted for 3 days straight. Following this event, leader of the armed services of Venezuela, Lucas Romero, asserted his control of the government by kidnapping Chavez and announcing the resignation of President Chavez on national TV and radio. Military leaders then appointed President Carmona, who immediately undone all of Venezuela's social and economic progressive policies, and locked out the elected government officials of the Constitutional Assembly. This coup was funded and supported by the Bush administration. What a shock there. The funding came in the form of aid and was given to the CTV by way of the U.S. Endowment for Democracy, which gave the money to the American Center for International Labor Solidarity, which then gave the money to CTV. Although President Bush openly supported the coup, direct support came from within his administration through Otto Reich and Elliott Abrams. If you recall from my previous broadcast, Abrams is a member of PNAC and was convicted of crimes here in the U.S. Both Abrams and Otto Reich are linked to the creation of death squads, also known as the School of the Americas. In regards to the coup attempt against Chavez, the leaders of the coup including interim President Carmona, were invited to the White House months before and continued to visit until just weeks before the coup. Because of the unraveling of the progressive policies of Chavez, uprisings occurred, and eventually soldiers who had not defected pushed for a counter-coup with the support of the people. This group freed Chavez and reinstated the democratically elected government. The rioting started by CTV lasted for 3 days, which led to the coup that lasted for only 2 days. Luckily, the people of Venezuela, this was only 5 days of hell for them. One can only imagine what it's like for the people of Iraq. The U.S. government had more to do with this coup, however, than simply inviting the terrorists to the White House and supplying them with money. Chavez claimed to have seen aircraft belonging to the U.S. where he was held, and also released proof that American naval vessels and aircraft were spotted in Venezuelan waters and airspace. Former U.S. intelligence officer for the U.S. Navy and NSA analyst Wayne Madsen also alleged naval involvement. However, through all this, the Bush administration claimed that the U.S. had no involvement. Another obvious lie. Later that same year, the CTV again attempted to assert domination by ordering a lockout of then privately controlled Venezuelan oil company PDVSA. Funding for this also came from the U.S. government through the previously mentioned sources. The lockout lasted 2 months and caused unemployment to increase by 5% and negatively impacted the entire Venezuelan economy. The Venezuelan government eventually fired 19,000 of PDVSA's management and CTV supporters. This led to the nationalization of PDVSA. With the nationalization, the oil company took a more humanitarian approach to business. Most notably, in 2005, PDVSA provided Argentina with 50 million tons of fuel oil to help the nation cope with an energy crisis. PDVSA and its subsidiary Citgo sold heating oil to low-income families in the United States at 40% below market prices. Since 2003, several more attempts have been made to oust President Chavez, including a presidential recall. Through all this, Chavez continues to call for reform and improve Venezuela's quality of life. Chavez maintains ties with neighboring countries, including Cuba, in an effort to increase literacy and improve healthcare systems in Latin America. In response to NAFTA conditions, which favor the economy of the United States only, Venezuela and Cuba created the Bolivarian alternative for the Americas. The BAA currently has Venezuela, Cuba, Nicaragua, and Bolivia as members, with Iran seeking current membership. Recently, the U.S. government has intensified negative press attacks against Venezuela and claims that the quality of life in Venezuela has not improved. Apparently, the Bush administration is unaware that Datos Information Resources has been tracking the economic situation in Venezuela for quite some time and reported that its poorest citizens saw an income growth of over 150%. While there's so much more to report on the progress of Chavez and Venezuela, as well as U.S.-sponsored terrorist attacks in Latin American countries, it's simply too much to report in one broadcast. However, it's becoming insanely obvious that the true terrorists in this world are members of PNAC and the Bush administration. If you know anybody who still supports Bush and Cheney's criminal war against Iraq, have them take a look at a short news report that was aired on July 16th on ABC News titled Exclusive Look at Soldiers on the Front Line. Again, that's called Exclusive Look at Soldiers on the Front Line. It'll sicken you and anyone else who watches it. The news clip, an all too rare honest look at the war from a reporter allowed to see it firsthand, is from cameraman Sean Smith from the British newspaper The Guardian. Embedded with the 2nd Infantry Division's Apache Company in Baghdad, shows tired and overwrought U.S. troops into their 14th month of continuous battle as they respond to a variety of battle situations. In one case, after watching 6 of their comrades burn to death inside a trapped Bradley armored vehicle that a roadside bomb had flipped over and ignited, the soldiers break into a house looking for weapons, only to find themselves terrorizing an old woman with a walker, who dissolves into hysterical tears. In another scene, the men open fire on a car cruising the neighborhood, which they fear might be a terrorist looking for a target. After killing the driver, they learn from a local woman that it was just a taxi driver that she had called, who was trying to locate her address. It's time to wake up, people. And if you'd like to contact me, you can email me at specterred@gmail.com. And remember, folks, the revolution is now.